Hi everyone, my name's Tony Clements and my day job is at Hammersmith and Fulham Council, but I'm here talking to you as part of the Relationships Project. And the Relationships Project, we believe that good relationships build a better world, better communities, better societies, and in particular for this session, better councils and better public services. I joined you all at the start of the Thinkers and Doers network back in November, and I'm delighted to be able to join you again, even though I'm being recorded and played back. And what I want to talk to you about is some new work that we've published from the Relationships Project about a month ago, that we're calling our Kit for Councils. And it's a set of resources to help councils build in good relationships at the heart of what councils do and at the heart of all our services. So the kit has three bits to it. We have a relationships framework, which is a set of principles for sustaining and nurturing the community activity that emerged over the last year of COVID. And that's really our jumping off point. You know, how do we cement and learn from some of the good things that did happen over the past year, despite, you know, the loss and difficulty that many people faced. So first is a framework with our set of principles. Second is our framework in action. And this is where we've collected loads of examples from local authorities across the country who have supported community activity, supported self-help, and supported and worked with the community and voluntary sector to do things more in a relationships-based and community-based way. Some of that is through the COVID year, some of that is before. And I think the most sort of inspiring and compelling stuff you see is what people have already put into practice. So we were really keen that this wasn't just a theoretical exercise. And then the third thing in our kit is the Relationships Navigator. And this is a little tool, a little exercise to help you think about in your council, in your organization, in your team, among your colleagues, about where you've really built in good relationships at the heart of how you're doing things, and where you might be able to do a bit more with the help of our framework and our examples in action. So if we move on to the next slide. What I'm going to do next is talk through our 9 principles very briefly, and then have a conversation about some of the material. So our first 3 things are the things that have were the sort of most immediate things in the COVID year about how councils worked with communities, residents, and the community and voluntary sector. And the first principle is about shifting the obstacles. So, you know, whenever you talk to community or voluntary sector about working with councils, one of the things that always comes through is, you know, councils, they do things that get in the way. So the next, you know, one of the real things we can build on is during COVID, people told us all the things that got in the way just seemed to vanish, or we found solutions around them because the need was so urgent and we needed to do something that somehow, you know, data sharing and procurement and all these other kind of rules, you know, we managed to get through it and quickly to give people the help that they needed. The second thing is about sustaining motivation and purpose, because lots of the sort of mutual help and the fact that people were helping out their friends and neighbours, it was motivated by the most visible crisis we could imagine. All of our lives were touched by COVID. And it really showed up some of the problems and issues that needed addressing in our neighbourhoods, whether it's isolated older people or I don't know, struggling families that needed a bit of a helping hand. it just made all of that visible. Now, of course, those things exist whether there's a global pandemic or not. So the other thing that councils can do is help connect people to the problems and issues that they might be able to help with that they might not otherwise see. Because one thing councils do tend to do is see the problems out there. And then thirdly, sort of building what we call the COVID infrastructure. So the community hubs, the volunteers, helping them continue to do what they've done during the COVID years, and in particular, in the community hubs, bringing the public sector and community and voluntary sector and volunteers all under one roof to be to work together. And then some other principles that are sort of learning that we can sort of build into business as usual as councils. And I think the first thing to say is, if as councils we want to build better relationships with our citizens, or help citizens build good relationships with each other, we've got to be trusted. And I think councils can do more to be more open in their decision making, more open in the information that they hold, sometimes more honest when we fall short. So we need to work to be well trusted in our communities if we're going to say we're about relationships. The next one the next principle is enhancing. We called it enhancing the everyday touch points. And what we mean by this is, every day there's thousands of examples of where councils are touching residents' lives, providing services, in contact with them. And if we viewed all of those contacts through the lens of how does this help build good relationships, then we could make a massive difference just by the way we run our core business. So, rather than think of, say, a library as a place just where you borrow books, maybe we should think of a library principally as a place of how do we use it to build better relationships. So it's less about the information people access and more about who do they meet when they're there, what community groups use it, how busy is it throughout the day, morning, day and night. And then also thinking similarly how we build relationships and the ability to make good relationships within the physical space. So councils, we build and design roads, parks, high streets, we build housing, we do regeneration schemes. And we all know in our daily lives, don't we, that there's some places where it feels comfortable to stop and chat and strike up conversation and get to know new people. And then there's other places that don't feel safe, don't feel clean, where we just want to rush on through. So a focus on how we build the sort of bumping into spaces into our public realm. And as I touched on, one of the big changes through the COVID year is the way that councils worked as equals, often with the community and voluntary sector, and how councils were able to fund and support the community and voluntary sector, often very quickly, at very short notice, to do things that councils on their own couldn't do. And really, it's another example of we sort of quickly renewed a relationship there, and there's no reason that many of those features can't continue after COVID and reap the same sort of benefits. And then around sort of training and empowering our staff. So for lots of people, this isn't natural territory. If you've been a council officer, you wouldn't necessarily think that this is your job. So how do we build in some of that capacity? And we thought of ideas like giving community development training to all frontline staff, whether you're in housing management or parks or community safety. How do we build that in as an element of how all council staff interact with people? And I also really like the idea we had of reverse mentoring for senior leaders. So doing your job for a while with a member of the community alongside you, as a way to sort of show up your blind spots or the unintended effects of some of the policies and things that you do. And then finally, embracing new accountabilities. So if we're really going to say relationships are at the heart of what we do, we need to say it publicly, and we need to sort of hold ourselves to account a bit. So we had ideas like, let's publish an annual report for community relationships-based activity in a place each year. And maybe that could be overseen by an independent panel of residents who either publish it or approve it, just as a way to keep some scrutiny, keep it in the limelight, the commitment that we've made to this way of working. And these next couple of slides, this is just what the framework looks like, or sorry, the framework in action. So the examples that we've drawn from across the country of this way of working. Here you go. So here's just a little snapshot of a council, the principle that we feel it embodies, and some of them are big and strategic stuff. Others are just like quick ideas that you might be able to pick up and implement quickly, but just a wealth of data. And it's always great, isn't it? Whenever you're faced with a skeptic, it's always good to have the example of where something's already working well. And then, yeah, so this is just the logo for our Relationships Navigator, a little tool if you go to the Relationships Project website that might help you sort of use some of these ideas and work out where you could use more of these ideas in your work. So I'll stop there because I think I'm going to talk to Jane and Adrienne.
Yeah, hi, thanks for that, Tony. It's a really helpful insight into relationships and the importance of building those more productive and thriving relationships. So really helpful. Thank you for that. Yes. I guess we've got a few questions, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I'd like to understand in a bit more depth. So I suppose the first question, you reflected on the fact that much has been done through the period where we had COVID. And I suppose the first question really is, why do you think there's a need for the framework to exist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. It's a good question. I mean, and it's also a good question because, in some ways we describe this as if it's completely new to local authorities, but we're big organizations, aren't we? And often on the front line, there's people who are naturally really good at building good relationships with residents and their clients or within the community. But I think we just thought, sometimes, there's a risk that saying we want relationships to be at the center of our work. It sounds compelling, but it could sound a bit intangible. So we really wanted to show people some principles they could work with, and also, as I said, those examples of where it's already working in practice. So so we just wanted to give some structure to make it sort of feel real and tangible to people. And I also think we're all really busy in our jobs in local authorities, aren't we? I mean, after 10 years of austerity, all of us have had jobs that have just grown and grown and grown. And actually, often we just don't have that thinking space, do we? So we thought the Relationships Project, a good thing would be if we could sort of make some of this work sort of quick and easy to digest and easy to incorporate into people's work. So hopefully sort of posing the question and providing some of the answers at the same time, we hope.
Was it a conscious decision, Tony, to kind of adopt a real council view of this rather than kind of taking that more holistic community contributors view? Was it a decision that you took, in a conscious way?
Well, look, actually, then this is something I missed out. So the Relationships Project is not a local government project. Actually, it is about all sectors, public, private, community, voluntary, about civic society, and this is just one part of it. The local government, this kit for councils, local government element. But if you go visit the Relationships Project, you'll find some fascinating materials that can be used by other sectors, and that tell a story of our COVID year. That I think makes sense to you, whatever sector you work in. So we very much see that this is one part of the picture, and having a society where relationships are at their heart is not something that the government or the public sector can sort of make happen. We can only be part of that system.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tony. I'll hand over to Jane.
So just to talk a little bit more about the framework, obviously you've described to us, Tony, that it has 9 principles in order to ensure its successful implementation. I wondered which one of the 9 you think perhaps presents the most challenges to something like a local government?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the one I think is trickiest is because the way you communicate it is, it's got to be sort of really kind of subtle, is that bit about how we sustain people's motivation for sort of, you know, supporting and helping their neighbours. Because, you know, when the first lockdown happened, it was really galvanizing, wasn't it? We were sort of on war footing, weren't we? All hands on deck. It was wall-to-wall news. We all knew what was happening, and we all knew that the things we were doing on our street and in our community were part of a bigger fight against the pandemic. And then as we come out of COVID, how we talk to communities and neighbourhoods that sort of says, look, these problems are still amongst you, and they always were. And you know, you can play a role here, and it is just as important now as it was under the sort of COVID conditions. You know, that's true, but we've got to put that across in a really sort of compelling way that galvanizes action in the same way. So I think it's going to take some, you know, skilled community workers, comms people, counsellors, you know, to really kind of make that message work again.
And in the work that you've done, and I guess the observations you've made of other councils, which one do you think makes the greatest difference? So if people can really get hold of one principle and really drive it through into practice, which one do you think, if you had to choose one, would make the best?
So I think the most powerful one is sort of making it an objective, making it a goal of all our services to be about building relationships. Because the more I think of it, you know, there's a relationship building aspect of everything that we do with the public, and you know, if we're able to sort of help our staff with a few of those skills, and with that kind of mindset, I just think that could be hugely powerful. And again, like, you kind of see it already in some council services, don't you? You'll find like a colleague or you know, someone who works directly with residents, who just has that sort of entrepreneurial spark or bit of charisma or something like that can really bring people together. And I just think if you're able to spread that and use it, you know, share a little bit of those skills and a little bit of that magic through everything you do, I just think that's the thing that'll make the biggest difference.
Thanks for that, Tony. I suppose there's a little bit of nervousness on our part, really, as the country starts to sort of relax back to some sort of semblance of normality. And the tendency, I think, for lots of organisations will be to sort of slowly drift back into the old ways of working. And from our perspective, I suppose that might introduce some resistance to some of the principles that are in the framework around, you know, for example, creation of roles that might have long ago, you know, disappeared due to financial cuts. So I'm particularly interested in how you'd recommend sort of developing those ongoing courageous sort of conversations with colleagues to keep moving forwards with the framework.
Yeah, really good question. So I think there's a few bits to that. So one bit, I think, is that there's a point in time to do it now. So, you know, all of us in councils have had our working lives, you know, almost completely changed over the last year with what we've had to address. And I think we've found ourselves and found our colleagues sort of been able to do things we wouldn't have thought we could have done, but the need arose, and we responded, you know, in the best sort of, you know, best values and traditions of public service. So I think certainly in my organisation, you know, that's still quite alive for us at the moment. So I think it's sort of the first thing to do is sort of have those conversations now and sort of capitalize on it while it's still, well, you know, things we've done are still fresh in our minds, and while it's still really fresh that we did things differently for a while. I also think that most councils, or that I know of, if not all, are saying things can't go completely back to how they were before COVID. And I think that just creates an opportunity to sort of push this agenda into that space. So we all talk about technology, but, you know, working with the community and being more responsive to the community is absolutely in that space as well. So I think there's a point in time, and I think the door is open. And I think I'd just recommend as well, you know, drawing on the examples of where your council has done it well in the past year, you know. So it's not, you're not opening up a conversation of something that's completely new. You're able to say, look, we did this, and we can do more of it. And then, you know, there's always a bit of internal coalition building, isn't there? So, you know, find your allies and the people that think like you and think how you can work together to influence others as well.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of views in terms of that long-term sustainability and sort of maintaining the energy levels around the agenda at all?
Well, I guess my idealistic hope would be the more you start working in this way, the more people see the benefits, and it becomes sort of more, you know, it becomes reinforcing. So I think there's nothing like just giving something a try and seeing how it works and proving that it works, or if it doesn't work, changing and trying something else. So I think that so I would hope that sustainability comes from action and learning from that action. I think there is also a bit, and this is the sort of I don't know, for those of us in the public sector, slightly gloomy bits that, you know, we thought austerity might be easing off, but suddenly it seems like it won't be. And I think the truth is that some of our more traditional services are more expensive to deliver than if we can create a bit more sort of organic and community action. So I think that will be a bit of a driver as well to continue to work, you know, look for these kind of solutions and work in this way. So, you know, that will unfortunately be a feature for us for a while, I think, in councils.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you for that insight, Tony. I think that's all the questions that we've got. So
actually, I might jump in because one has occurred to me as I'm listening, and that is that the Thinkers and Doers network will include quite a few people from the local NHS, Tony, and I wondered whether the Relationships Project is engaging with NHS bodies, or you have any examples of the framework being taken up by NHS bodies.
Really, really good question. So we have been engaging over the last year with people who've worked in the NHS as part of our relationships observatory that we've been running. But I guess more people are, you know, that's been more people on a sort of individual basis. And I'm just thinking now, sort of looking at these kind of principles. So I wonder. So I think there's definitely scope for the NHS to continue to sort of deepen its voluntary sector and community sector relationships. And, you know, one of the things that we've been that's influenced us has been around the procurement of services from voluntary and community sector. And the NHS is a far bigger procurer of things than local authorities. So I think that's perhaps an immediate one for me, that, you know, even a small portion of the NHS budget going into that sector could build lots of capacity and make a real difference. So so that's my go-to. But I will be really interested to hear what your participants from the NHS make of these principles, and where they think it works for them.
Exactly. Maybe Coventry and Warwickshire will be the place where, you know, some local NHS makes a concerted effort to implement them. I hope
Yeah,
so. I
Absolutely.
hope so.
that would be great.
So, shall I just say thank you on behalf of the whole network for taking some time out this evening to record this? Really appreciate it, and hope as everyone's watching back that you're having a great time somewhere on holiday.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.